His white coat hides a tenderness that loses control for you. It was raining hard on the evening I received the diagnosis of moderate depression. I arrived home drenched, my heart feeling even colder than my wet body. The pinned chat on WeChat still showed no reply. That name, Wennoanyang, felt like a thorn piercing the softest part of my heart. We used to be inseparable best friends, but now she was the source of all my pain, a longing I couldn't put into words. I am Mujin, a freelance photographer. Wennoanyang is a PR director, dazzling as the scorching sun, while I am merely the moss in her shadow. I depended on her, was obsessed with her, and hated this twisted emotion. She was always surrounded by people who were more useful, and I could only trade my humble flattery for her occasional pity. She would nitpick the composition of photos I poured my heart into. Yet when I shot promotional images for her events for free, she would smile and say, "You understand me best." The last few times we met, she was always absent-mindedly scrolling through her phone, telling me I was too sensitive, saying we had less and less to talk about. She was no longer willing to be my model like before, letting me capture her fleeting expressions. For a while, I thought we had just drifted onto different life paths, until I saw a post in the likes history of her private Weibo account. It read, "Some people are like rats in the gutter, only daring to peep at the light from the dark." The attached image was a candid shot of her profile, a photo she had once smiled at and said, "You captured the essence of my soul." In that moment, I understood. She had known my feelings for a long time, and she was ashamed of them. I didn't confront her. In college, I was known as a rising talent in the photography department. I won awards and was full of pride and confidence. My lens captured light and shadow, as well as the subtleties of human nature. Then, in my final year, my family fell apart. My father's business failed, my mother fell gravely ill, and my entire world collapsed in an instant. When Nuanyang was the one who helped me through those darkest times. She helped me find a hospital, brought me food when I spent all night developing photos, back when I was obsessed with the texture of film. She told me, "Mujin, there is light in your lens. Don't let it go out." After that, I clung to her like she was a lifeline, unable to tell the difference between dependence and love. My lens began to focus solely on her, as if her approval was the only meaning my work had. She said she loved how I photographed her, said we would be friends forever, and said my talent shouldn't go to waste, and so I lived as her shadow. For 3 years, I constantly compromised and gave in, feeding this deformed relationship with my obedience. I gave up the chance to join a professional photography team because, she said, freelancing will let your talent shine. In reality, she just needed someone available to handle on-site photos for her PR events, or to shoot those high-class portraits she used for social media. My camera gradually transformed from a tool of self-expression into a prop to please her. I was afraid of losing her, but even more afraid of facing the real me, who was slowly blurring and losing focus behind the viewfinder. Today, staring at the words, "moderate depression," accompanied by anxiety symptoms on the diagnosis, I suddenly felt sick of myself. My world had shrunk until only when Nuanyang remained, and she couldn't even spare a glance at my pain. "You need a support system," the doctor said gently. The first person I thought of was still her, and then I laughed self-deprecatingly. My support system was the very root of my depression. At 9 o'clock that night, when Nonyang finally replied, it was a single character. "I looked at our WeChat moments post from this morning, complaining about work and asking for comfort. Below it was my long, caring comment, along with the event photos I had edited for her until midnight. Her only response had been, 'Thanks, babe. These are really good.'" Taking a deep breath, I typed out, "I went to the hospital today." "Hmm? Caught a cold?" "Drink more hot water," she replied. I had clearly told her this morning that I had an appointment with the psychiatry department. My anxiety had been building since I pressed send, yet she hadn't even noticed. "When Nuanyang, we need to talk." "Mujin, I'm a bit busy right now. I have a project to follow up on. Can we talk later?" It was followed by a standard, perfunctory hugging emoji. Just 5 minutes. I was practically begging. "I really can't. The client is rushing me." "Stop being so willful all the time. Try to understand me, okay? Always? Willful?" I looked at the chat history, at my pleas for help that had sunk like stones, at the photos I had taken to share with her. Gloomy skies and lonely street corners that I thought represented my state of mind. She had never responded. It felt like an invisible hand was gripping my heart, making it nearly impossible to breathe. The notification for a special post rang out. When Nuonyang had updated her Weibo, in a grid of 9 photos, she was raising her glass with a brilliant smile at a high-end Western restaurant. The caption read, "Dinner with amazing partners. So rewarding." Tried the composition, the color grading, even the curve of her smile. All carried a carefully calculated perfection that was completely different from the style of the photos I took for her. The timestamp showed 10 minutes ago. I clicked open the moment's post she had made that afternoon, saying she was too tired to move. My comment telling her to rest well was still there. The truth pierced through my final self-deception like an ice pick. She wasn't busy. She just didn't have time for me. She wasn't tired. She was just tired of me. I had thought loneliness was just a normal part of life, until the psychologist named Meng Yen handed me a slip of paper with his private number on it. The diagnosis paper was crumpled in my hand, the edges softening from the water and sweat. Moderate depression accompanied by anxiety symptoms. The doctor's words echoed in my ears. You put too much pressure on yourself. You need a support system. You need to find a source of value outside of that person. Support system? The thought of Wen Nuanyang made my stomach churn. My world had been built around her, and now that the foundation had collapsed, everything was falling down. Just yesterday, she had said, "Mujin, you fiddle with those black, white, and gray tones all day, shooting so-called art that nobody looks at. What kind of future is in that? You'd be better off taking more commercial orders or just helping me shoot events properly. At least the exposure is high." I had just remained silent, my fingers unconsciously rubbing the cool metal casing of my camera. Now I understood. She had kicked me out of her world long ago, yet she was still greedily absorbing the last bit of value I had to offer. The person in the mirror had a pale face, sunken eyes, and a hollow gaze, looking like an underexposed waste of a photograph. Over these years, I had been so busy looking up at her through the lens that I had almost forgotten who I was. Forgotten the initial thrill I felt when pressing the shutter. Inside my camera bag, there was still a small trinket she had casually shoved at me after our last shoot. A gift from a client that she didn't like. Back then, I had treated it like a treasure. The second time I met Dr. Meng Yen was in his simple, quiet consulting room. He wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing well-defined wrists. Behind his gold-rimmed glasses, his gaze was focused and calm, as if he could penetrate all disguises and see the true image on the negative. "How did you feel yesterday?" he asked. His voice was calm, holding no excessive sympathy, just a professional concern. I wanted to speak, to describe that hollowed-out feeling, to talk about the cold rain, but my throat felt blocked by darkroom developer, stinging with dryness. Tears rolled out of control, large drops splashing onto the back of my tightly clasped hands. He handed me a box of tissues and placed it within easy reach. "In here, you can express any emotion, including silence." I spoke brokenly about Wen Luanyang, about my obsession and self-loathing, about how my lens had lost focus, and about those sugary, insincere photos I took just to please her. By the end, I was almost sobbing, incoherent. He listened quietly, occasionally jotting notes in his notebook, but mostly encouraging me to go on with his eyes. In an unbalanced relationship, it is often the one who gives more who gets drained. He waited until I was slightly calmer before speaking slowly. "Have your feelings, your needs been seen all these years?" His sentence split open the foggy maze in my heart. "No, never. I was just playing the role she needed. Quiet, sensible, talented, and useful." My pain, my confusion, my unspeakable affections. I had carefully hidden them all outside the viewfinder. "Perhaps you can try learning to set boundaries," he suggested. "For example, when you need solitude to create, or when your mood is low, politely decline her last-minute invitations. When you feel sad, you don't have to force a smile to agree with her. I'm afraid she will leave. I'm afraid of losing this last connection." My voice trembled. If clear boundaries cause a relationship to end, it means that relationship was built on your constant compromises and sacrifices to begin with. Meng Yan's voice was calm, yet it carried a strangely supportive strength. A true connection should be able to accommodate the real you, including your fragility and your no. The test came quickly, like a flash of lightning without warning, instantly illuminating my flustered heart. That night, when Nonyang called, the background noise was loud music and chatter. Jin, come pick me up at Udon. I've been drinking, I can't drive. Before, no matter how late it was, or whether I was developing photos in the darkroom, or editing at a critical point, I would have dropped everything to rush over. But today, after hanging up, I looked at the text confirming my appointment at Meng Yan's clinic on my screen. I remembered his calm eyes and the words, "Accommodate the real you." I took a deep breath and called her back. "I'm not feeling well. I got my diagnosis today, and I'm in a bad state. Call a designated driver yourself." There was silence on the line for a few seconds, and then she exploded. "What do you mean? Mujin, are you still my friend or not? You don't care that I drank too much. I am your friend, not your exclusive driver and photographer on call." My fingernails dug deep into my palm, bringing a sharp pain. "And I went to the hospital today. Psychiatry. I told you." Here we go again. Can't you just be a bit more positive? Locking yourself in the dark room all day doing those gloomy things, or just obsessing over your little emotions. You're so dramatic. If you don't come, there are plenty of others to pick me up. Her voice was sharp, filled with the anger of someone defied. The phone was hung up abruptly. It felt as if all the strength was instantly drained from my body. I slumped onto the cold floor, cold sweat breaking out on my back. But strangely, beneath the huge loss and panic, there was a strange, faint sense of relief, like a taut string that, though pulled painfully, had finally loosened a notch. My phone rang again. It was an unknown number, but the last 4 digits were the same as Meng Yan's work phone. "Miss Mujin, this is Meng Yan. You left your medical record at the clinic." He paused, his voice coming through the receiver with a trace of warmth, not easily noticeable in the consulting room. "Are you okay from just now?" I froze. Why would he call at this time? Was it a coincidence? Or had his professional intuition guessed that I might be facing a struggle? Trying to set boundaries is often accompanied by intense anxiety and self-blame in the early stages. This is normal. He didn't seem to expect an answer, continuing in that calm voice. "If you feel uncomfortable, you can try taking a few deep breaths or do something that helps you relax, like listening to music or fiddling with your camera. You don't have to take photos." A faint warmth quietly flowed into my frozen heart. He remembered my profession and was trying to support me in a way I might be familiar with. The next day, I went to the clinic to get my medical record. In the waiting area, I met a fashionably dressed lady complaining at the front desk. Her voice was sharp, and she was going on about the unfairness of Dr. Meng Yan's schedule. Why does a new patient get frequent appointments? Is it based on who looks more pitiful? Does Dr. Meng have a specific savior complex? Meng Yan came out of the consulting room upon hearing the noise. He wore a dark gray sweater today, looking a bit less serious than before, but his tone remained calm and firm. "Miss Wang, my schedule is based entirely on the needs of each client after a professional assessment. If you have objections to my arrangement, we can discuss it in detail at our next session. If you insist it is unfair, you can also choose another counselor who better meets your expectations." The woman glared at me resentfully. Her gaze swept over my body like a searchlight, filled with scrutiny and disdain. Who knows what kind of needs? She does have a pretty face, though. My face burned instantly. A familiar urge to retreat seized me. I was always afraid of being the focus of conflict, afraid of being judged. Meng Yan stepped sideways, subtly positioning himself between me and the woman. He turned to me, his tone strictly professional. "Mujin, the assessment report is ready. There are some details I need to confirm with you in person. Please go to consulting room 3 and wait for me." He handed me a document, his gaze briefly meeting mine, carrying a power that steadied the heart. In the consulting room, he pointed to the charts and data on the report. "The assessment shows that you have a clear tendency toward a people-pleasing personality, accompanied by low self-worth. This is significantly reflected in both your intimate relationship patterns and your career choices." "Can it be cured?" I asked, my voice dry. "This isn't a disease that needs to be cured, but rather a long-term behavioral pattern formed for self-protection," he corrected. "Patterns can change. The key is whether you are willing to start valuing your own feelings and needs, instead of hiding them forever behind a lens meant to please others." He looked at me, his gaze focused. You deserve to be treated well, Mujin, including by yourself. That sentence was like a precise beam of light, illuminating a corner of my heart that had never been seen before. I lowered my head, my eyes stinging with heat. My phone vibrated inopportunely with the name Wen Nuanyang jumping on the screen. I subconsciously wanted to reject it, just like I had countless times before, to avoid disturbing her during any important moment or causing her displeasure. Answer it, Meng Yan suddenly said. Put it on speaker. If you're willing, you can try responding, using the method we just discussed. I took a deep breath, pressed the answer button, and tapped speaker. Mujin, you dared to hang up on me yesterday? And what was that about not being a driver? Do you know the designated driver I called later took a detour, making me spend extra money and be late for tomorrow's morning meeting? Did you do it on purpose? When Nuanyang's voice crashed down like a barrage of artillery, carrying the hoarseness of a hangover and thick resentment. I tightened my hands resting on my knees, my knuckles turning white. When Nuanyang, I am busy right now. Also, what you said yesterday made me very uncomfortable. I hope you can apologize. The other end of the line went silent instantly, as if the signal had been cut. After several seconds, her voice rang out again, filled with disbelief. Apologize? Mujin, are you okay? Just because of your little depression, the whole world has to indulge you. Have you been brainwashed by that psychiatrist? I only ask that my friend respect my feelings. If you can't do that, then I think we need to reconsider this relationship. I said, word for word, my heart pounding in my chest like a runaway shudder. Fine, you're amazing. Don't you regret it? Without a sensitive and meddlesome friend like you, I don't know how much more relaxed I'll be. She almost roared this sentence, then slammed the phone down. Only the busy tone remained in the receiver. My hand was still trembling slightly, but a strange, faint, yet solid strength was surging in my chest. I did it. I didn't compromise. I didn't apologize. And I didn't break down under her nasty attitude. A hint of a smile, almost imperceptible, flashed in Meng Yan's eyes behind his lenses, but he quickly returned to calm. You did very well. Remember that feeling from just now? After falling out with Wen Nuanyang, the world seemed to go quiet in an instant. For the first few days, a massive sense of loss and panic washed over me. Like the tide again and again, I would subconsciously pick up my phone to share a moment with her, or want to capture an interesting scene to send to her, only to suddenly remember that we had already broken ties. The withdrawal reaction was painful and real. But as time passed, the constant tension and anxiety, always ready to cater to her, was actually slowly easing. I no longer needed to stare at my phone, worrying about missing her messages or summons. I no longer needed to force myself to take those bright, colorful commercial photos just to fit her aesthetic. I no longer needed to sink into long periods of self-doubt when she criticized my work for being too niche or not sunny enough. I saw Meng Yan on schedule. Under his guidance, like developing an overexposed negative, I slowly traced back the childhood experiences and family interaction patterns that shaped my personality. The process was painful, like working in a dark room, requiring immense patience and precision. One slip-up could ruin everything. But he was always there, calm, reliable, and professional, like an experienced darkroom technician, guiding me on how to control the development time and adjust the contrast, allowing the real image to slowly emerge. He taught me to use cognitive behavioral therapy to identify and challenge those deeply rooted negative automatic thoughts, such as, I am not worthy of love, or I must be perfect not to be abandoned. He led me in practicing mindfulness meditation to help me anchor myself in the present, rather than drowning in regret over the past or fear of the future. Occasionally, when I made a tiny bit of progress, like actively refusing an unreasonable work request, or capturing a set of photos that truly expressed my own emotions, he would nod slightly and say, not bad. Just those two words were enough to make me happy for a long time, as if I had received the most important validation. I knew this was likely transference, projecting unmet emotional needs from the past onto the authoritative figure of a doctor. But I also knew that the professional support and emotional containment he gave me were real and powerful. I started picking up my camera again, not to please anyone, but to express myself. I wandered into the corners of the city, photographing forgotten spots, mottled walls, and the lonely shadows of pedestrians. I began trying to create a series of themed works about boundaries and the self, using images to explore the relationship between the individual and the outside world. I shared these photos, carrying gloom and glimmers of light, on a niche photography platform and unexpectedly received some sincere resonance and encouragement. It turns out that the real self, even with cracks and shadows, is someone people are willing to see and even be moved by. After one session, a torrential rain started outside, and I didn't have an umbrella. Meng Yan packed up his documents, looked out the window, and then picked up his black umbrella. I'll give you a ride. His car was very clean, with a faint scent of wood, and the car stereo played soothing classical guitar pieces. The atmosphere was subtly quiet. Dr. Meng, I summoned my courage, looking at the blurry, rainy scenery outside the window. Do many clients easily develop dependency on their doctors? As soon as I asked, I regretted it. It was crossing the line. He was silent for a few seconds, his fingers tapping lightly on the steering wheel. In a therapeutic relationship, developing dependent feelings is a common phenomenon. It is even the beginning of change. A professional doctor will identify this emotion and try to transform it into the client's own inner strength. A standard and professional answer. I let out a breath of relief, but felt a vague sense of loss in my heart. The car stopped at the entrance of the old residential complex, where I rented an apartment. The rain had eased slightly, but was still fine and dense. Thank you, Dr. Meng. I unbuckled my seatbelt, preparing to rush into the rain. He suddenly called out to me, took a folded sticky note from the storage box, and handed it over. My private number. If, outside of consultation hours, you encounter a particularly difficult moment and feel you can't cope, you can call this number. I froze and didn't take it immediately. His expression remained calm, showing too much emotion. Seeking help isn't shameful, Mujin. Sometimes a timely lifeline is more important than anything. His fingers were slender and well-defined. As he handed over the note, his fingertips accidentally brushed against mine. His hand was very cool, but that brief contact felt like a faint electric current. I gripped that note tightly, like clutching a life-saving straw, yet like holding a hot sweet potato. I didn't call that number, but I saved it in my phone contacts with just a simple M. Knowing it existed was itself like a silent form of support. In those late nights when emotions surged, or in those moments when I pressed the shutter but felt incredibly lonely. Looking at that M, I would think of the steady and reliable figure in the consultation room and recall him saying, "You deserve to be treated well." This gave me the strength to hold on a little longer by myself. Meng Yan and I still maintained a purely professional therapeutic relationship. During consultations, he was still that calm, objective Dr. Meng, who occasionally offered guidance. It was just that occasionally. During the intervals between sessions, my inbox would receive some music links about art therapy and emotional regulation, or an article discussing photography and psychological healing that he shared anonymously. There was no signature, but I knew it was him. I would also muster the courage to send him some newly taken photos that I felt were breakthroughs via email, with a simple note. He usually wouldn't reply, but would mention it lightly in the next session, like, "The composition of that set of photos about shadows from last time has improved." Or, "That backlit shot of the withered branch was handled very well in terms of color and mood." We tacitly didn't mention that rainy night or the note with the private number. It was like a secret, properly stored in the silence of our mutual understanding. I was slowly rebuilding my life. I signed up for an advanced darkroom techniques class. I had always wanted to attend and met some peers who truly loved photography. I started selectively taking on commercial shoots that fit my aesthetic tastes. Although the pay wasn't as good as those routine jobs from before, my heart was full. I even began sorting through the negatives and digital files from these years, archiving and sealing away the photos taken for Wen Nuanyang, and selecting out the works that truly belonged to Mujin. Under the doctor's evaluation, my medication dosage was slowly reduced. In the mirror, my eyes were no longer so hollow, and my cheeks were gradually regaining their color. Until that day, in a high-end mall, while scouting locations for a promotional shoot for an independent designer brand, I bumped into Wen Nuanyang and the man beside her, whom I knew incredibly well, Chen Zhuo, whom I had once thought would be my future brother-in-law. The three of us collided face to face, all stunned. A hint of panic instantly flashed across Wen Nuanyang's face, but it was quickly replaced by her usual arrogance and a barely perceptible provocation. "Yo, Mujin, you look like you're doing pretty well without me. You can actually get jobs in a place like this now?" She looked me up and down, eyeing my simple workwear style and the camera in my hand. I looked at Chen Zhuo. He awkwardly averted his eyes, his fingers curling unnaturally. So that was it. No wonder, over the past few months, Wen Wenyoung had become increasingly impatient with me. And Chunjuo had always used being busy with work as an excuse to postpone the engagement photos we had agreed I would take for them. It turned out that while she was enjoying my comfort and on-call service, she was also secretly hooking up with the person I cared about most, whom I had once considered family. A wave of dizziness mixed with nausea, betrayal, and absurdity suddenly hit me, almost making me unable to stand. When did you two get together? My voice was dry. What business is it of yours? Wen Nuanyang sneered, linking her arm through Chenjuo's, as if declaring sovereignty. Mujin, you have no charm and can't hold onto a man's heart. So who can you blame? Did you expect me to keep accompanying you this? She scared me up and down, her unspoken words full of disdain. Those familiar vicious words with thorns stabbed at me like knives again. I felt the air around me become thin, and the camera in my hand became incredibly heavy. Just as I was about to lose my footing, a warm and powerful hand firmly supported my arm. You look pale. Are you unwell? It was Meng Yan. I don't know when he appeared by my side, his brows slightly furrowed, his gaze landing on my face with obvious concern. When Wanyang looked at him critically, a flash of surprise in her eyes, which then changed to a knowing, mocking expression. No wonder you've been a lot tougher lately, so you found a new partner. And he's a doctor? She deliberately lengthened her tone. Mengyan didn't even give her a full look, just swept a cold glance at her. That gaze was as sharp and cold as a scalpel, actually silencing the chattering Wen Nuanyang instantly. Let's go. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders and, with an unquestionable force, turned to lead me away, leaving that suffocating air behind. He didn't let go of my hand until we reached the central plaza outside the mall, where the sunlight and gentle breeze surrounded us. I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice still trembling. I didn't mean for you to see me in such a mess again. You're not the one who needs to apologize, he said, his voice as calm as ever, but carrying a decisive strength. It's the person who hurt others without a shred of guilt. What are you doing here? I looked up at him. He was wearing casual khakis and a light blue shirt today, looking much less formal than he did in the consultation room. I just happened to be buying some professional books at the bookstore nearby. He shook the paper bag in his hand, which featured the bookstore's logo. I saw you walk by when I was checking out. You looked terrible, so I followed to see if you were okay. So he hadn't just been passing by. He had noticed something was off and had deliberately followed me. That realization made my heart skip a beat. Are you still sad? He asked, his gaze settling on my face. It was filled with scrutiny, but even more with concern. I took a deep breath and honestly assessed my emotions. The shock and nausea were still there, and the dull ache of betrayal lingered deep within me. But that imagined, heart-wrenching agony didn't seem to appear. Instead, it was replaced by a strange, utterly liberating sense of relief, as if the sword of Damocles hanging over my head had finally fallen. Yet I was still standing tall. It seems I'm not that sad anymore, I answered truthfully, even managing a tiny, relieved smile. I just feel that the old me who compromised so much for someone like that was really ridiculous. The corners of his mouth lifted in a barely perceptible smile. It shows your inner strength is growing, Mujin. You're starting to view this relationship objectively, instead of letting it define you completely. The golden glow of the setting sun spilled over us, stretching our shadows long, until they intertwined. Dr. Meng, I said softly, gazing at the rolling city skyline in the distance. It seems I might not need regular therapy sessions much longer. He paused before speaking. That is a good thing. It means you've recovered well and your internal support system has established itself and is working. His tone was even, carrying the usual professional encouragement of a doctor, speaking to a recovering patient. A faint sense of melancholy passed through my heart, and I lowered my head. We reached the intersection where we had to part ways. I turned to him and said solemnly, No, thank you so much for everything during this time. If it weren't for you, he interrupted me with a gentle look. I was just doing my job. What matters more is that you didn't give up on yourself. I nodded and turned to cross the street. Mujin, he suddenly called out to me. I looked back. The golden sunset light fell on him, outlining his tall, straight silhouette. He looked at me with a deep, focused gaze, no longer simply as a calm and objective psychologist. According to ethical guidelines, once the therapeutic relationship ends, a doctor and a former patient can have a new beginning. His voice wasn't loud, but it reached my ears clearly. When your therapy officially concludes, I want to formally get to know you as a man, not as your doctor. Is that okay? The world seemed to fall silent in an instant, leaving only the muffled sound of passing cars and my suddenly racing heart. I looked at his reflection in my eyes, my heart slowly enveloped by a warm, surging tide. It was a feeling of being seen, cherished, and allowed to move toward rebirth. After a long while, I heard my own voice, trembling slightly, but filled with courage and expectation, breaking forth from the depths. Yes,